Casey Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider, writes in the Insider section that Howie Roseman has a 10-year plan, and that plan has the Eagles set at quarterback. And, a couple of weeks ago, Jeffrey Lurie commented where he said the Eagles view Sam Bradford as the right person to quarterback the team now, and that they feel like they have the guy who can step in there later and really spearhead a position where they won't have to focus on this position for a long, long time. While it set off a lot of fireworks, Casey, you think that Howie Roseman actually knows what he's doing here.
Yeah, believe it or not, I know that's going to come as a surprise to a lot of Eagles fans to think that to be on Howie Roseman's side on the subject. But truth be told, if you start looking at the situation, because the Eagles have invested $43 million in quarterbacks. It's the second highest total for a quarterback value of any team in the league. But when you start looking at what they invested in and what they could get out of that investment, it looks like they've got a good long-term plan here.
All right, a lot of people look at this and say, well, you drafted this guy number 2, you signed Daniels, you threw all that money into him, you gave all this money to Bradford. What is the thinking? What's the process here? What's the thought process behind having 3 guys making so much money?
Now, it probably comes down to this simple. You got the short-term plan for Bradford. Now, Bradford, over the second half of the year last year, posted some really good numbers. He was tops in the league in weeks 9 through 17 in vertical yards per attempt. That's production on passes, 11 or more yards downfield. And he had the third completion percentage. So this is a guy who can be really good downfield and is very accurate, so you're getting some short-term upper-tier production from Bradford there. We know Wentz has good long-term potential. Again, you never know how these people are going to pan out, or a player of his caliber is going to pan out. But Scout Sync gave him upper-tier ratings in accuracy and in intangibles, which are 2 of the most important categories at quarterback. And Scout Sync doesn't give out top upper-tier grades unless you deserve those grades. So I like those 2, and I even like the Daniel pick. Sounds crazy for them to spend the kind of money they spent on him, a $21 million contract, but he's worked in Peterson's system the last 3 years. He knows the system. 3 quarterbacks, you want one of them at least who's going to be really familiar with what's going on. So I think keep the other quarterbacks get up to speed quicker, and also help the other teammates get up to speed quicker. So from that perspective, it seems like they've got, they can get something out of all the money that they spend on all these players.
You write over at ESPN.com, Casey, to start things off, or to make justification for all this money. You believe Bradford can be a top 10 quarterback, justifies giving him that money and having him on the same team as the number 2 overall pick.
Yeah, I don't think he's that far from being a top 10 quarterback. Look, in the first half of the year, he was terrible. He had the lowest total QBR in the league through weeks 1 through 8. I mean, he was not a good quarterback, but he was rusty, and there were a lot of elements that caused that. And then from weeks 9 to the end of the season, he's one of the top quarterbacks. I don't think he has to be a top 5 quarterback or something of that nature. I don't think, he was the number 1 pick in the league at one point, and he was a rookie of the year, and you think maybe he could be like a Cam Newton, but he doesn't have to be at that level. I think all he has to be is where, say, Tony Romo's been over the course of his career, which is about a top 10 quarterback. That's what you need. If you've got that in the NFC East, you've got top 10 quarterback or close to it production, I think that gives you more than enough to keep up in the division. And I think Bradford's track record, both at the end of last year and what we saw in some of his earlier incarnations in the NFL, I think it says that he can be at that level again.
How does the Doug Peterson, Andy Reid-esque offense fit his skill set?
He's done a lot of different systems throughout his career. He's done vertical-based offenses. He's done dink and dunk offenses. He's done high-speed offenses. It's looking for a quarterback who's accurate, who can make good decisions, and Bradford's always rated well my bad decision rate metric. He's always been, when he's healthy and when he's on his game, he's been an accurate quarterback. Again, 3rd best completion percentage over the second half of the season. So I think he can do the things that offense asks him to do. And that offense really puts a lot of emphasis on what the receivers can do after the catch, too. So I think it's going to be, Bradford, you get the ball to them, and then we've got to create situations where those receivers can get upfield.
Casey Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider here on the Sports Bash. All right, the second prong of this, as you say, add it all up, Bradford could be a top 10 guy. You also believe Wentz is a top 10 potential guy, taking him at number 2, too good to pass up. Got to take him, so you have 2 guys who you think can be top 10 level players on the roster at the same time.
Yeah, over the long term, it's going to take some time for Wentz to get to that level. But again, he rated tops in the accuracy rating, and he rated tops in intangibles, and he checked off 4 of the 7 Bill Parcells rules for drafting quarterbacks. Parcells had a system where he had 7 different questions that he had for quarterbacks about their performance and what they'd done, whether a 3-year starter, whether or not they had started a certain volume of games, won a certain volume of games. And Wentz checked off 4 out of 7, yes, but he could have checked off 6 if not for the wrist injury. And the only one he wouldn't have checked off was a 3-year starter. And I don't think there's any doubt that he could have been a 3-year starter. So I think he could have checked off 7 answers, set 7 yes answers in the Parcells rules. And when you look at the history of what the Parcells rules are, or how good if a top-tier quarterback checks off 7 yes answers, you get a franchise quarterback much more often than not. So I think Wentz, even if he doesn't quite get the franchise level, can be a top 10 quarterback if things pan out.
How long do you think how long does he need to sit, or how long before he has to play?
Ideally, and I think that's part of the reason they brought Daniel in, ideally you wouldn't want, I don't think, barring if he just shows that he's up to speed immediately, I think you let him sit for at least a year and maybe 2. It's great to get a quarterback out there, but if you can have Bradford play most of this year, and Bradford's track record says he might be injured and miss a game or 2 or something of that nature, and you could bring in somebody like Peter, or like Daniel, who knows Peterson's system, you don't have to put Wentz out there for a year, maybe 2, and you can just get him up to speed. It'd be nice to be able to do that, because it could be an Aaron Rodgers-esque situation where you can have him sit for a few years, really master things from a play calling perspective and from knowing the system and such, and then put him out there when say Sam Bradford gets into his early 30s and you start thinking this is time to replace the guy.
They do have Chase Daniel on the team as well. He's another guy who kind of knows the offense. Was he worth the money to have a guy to pick his brain?
It's funny. You can make the argument, no, that he wasn't. When I first saw them, it was like, you paid that kind of money for him? Why would you do this? But I think what they wanted was a continuity situation where we have somebody here who knows the system, who we can go out there and put. I just think about it this way. If you're thinking, again, longer term, and you say, okay, what happens if Sam Bradford gets hurt in week 2 or week 3, sometime early in the season? If he's not there, and now you're having to put your rookie Wentz out there, and that's a situation where you put a rookie out in the field before he's ready to be out in that field, you could be in a bad situation. So they wanted somebody, I think they said, if Bradford gets hurt, we want somebody who can go out there and integrate, run our offense immediately, not have a learning curve, because they already have 2 guys over the learning curve. We don't want a guy with a learning curve, so let's go ahead and pay extra to get him in here. We know we're not going to have the learning curve. He can go in early in the season, and Wentz is only going to have to go in if we have a true emergency and lose our top 2 quarterbacks, so it protects our investments.
Casey, the crux of the whole thing is you say over at ESPN.com, over in the insider section where you write the article, is that this is kind of the start of the quarterback position kind of going through a change.
Yeah, the NFL quarterback landscape is going to go through a dramatic change. Roseman talked about this at one point and said it was one of the things that really made the Eagles want to move up in the draft, because last season there were 35 quarterbacks who had enough pass attempts to be considered passer rating qualified. There were 16 of those players are 30 years or older, and 11 were 33 years or older. But here's the thing. Get this list of quarterbacks who are between the ages of 30 and 35 or older, so guys who are on the wrong side of 30. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Carson Palmer, Tony Romo, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Jay Cutler, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Aaron Rodgers, Alex Smith, Matt Ryan, and Joe Flacco. That's a huge volume of quarterbacks who, if you say in 5 years where are these quarterbacks going to be, most of these quarterbacks are going to be on the very much the wrong side of 30, and some of them are even going to be in their 40s. These guys are all going to be gone. That's nearly half of the league's elite quarterbacks, or upper-tier quarterbacks, who are going to be gone. So the Eagles looked at it and said, well, heck, we're going to have all these quarterbacks leaving. There's going to be a dearth of quarterbacks. Teams are going to need quarterbacks, so why don't we stockpile it now where we can go out, move up, and get Wentz? And when we've got a guy like Bradford, let's go and try and stockpile as much quarterback talent as we can now and get ahead of this curve, because in a few years, teams are going to be really desperate for quarterbacks.
Yeah, and, that all sounds great, which I agree with you. As you just mentioned, let's go over the list. Brady, Brees, Palmer, Romo, Manning, Rivers, Roethlisberger, Cutler, Fitzpatrick, Rodgers, Alex Smith, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco. They're all over 30 years old, so you have 2 guys who were under 30 when the game might be changing right there at that position. So the question becomes, was it worth all the distraction? I mean, was that whole Bradford wanting to be traded and all the fireworks that happened because of it, was it worth what is about to, what you think could happen here?
Well, you remember the Brett Favre and Rodgers situation. I mean, Favre had been the starter for a long time, and frankly, when they drafted Rodgers, Favre was still going to be the starter for a while. It wasn't like they were going to move him out, but Favre just didn't take it well. I think even it doesn't matter how good the starting quarterback is. If you bring in another guy, Joe Montana wasn't happy when they got Steve Young with the 49ers back in the day. I mean, you can go down the list of NFL history, and any time a starter sees a backup come in and might take his spot, they don't tend to take it well. Now, could they have handled it better? Maybe they could have. Maybe Bradford could have handled it better, too, to say, look, you're still the starter. You're probably going to be the starter for a couple, 3 years, and if you are the starter for 2 years and then you decide to leave and you play well with those 2 years, great, you're going to make yourself a ton of money. It's a perfect situation for you, too. So I think they all could have handled it better, but when you're looking at stockpiling personnel, you really got to look at it from a perspective, okay, well, we've got to handle this situation. We've got, we don't know how our players are going to handle this, but we need to be looking at it of what do we need to do now, and I think that's what the Eagles did and said, let's take care of the quarterback situation, and we've got to take care of how the players handle it. We got to take care of that afterwards. We got to make sure we've got quarterback talent first and foremost.
So what overall, when you look at the Eagles situation, is this something that other teams are going to start to do, where they get that 2-year stopgap quarterback? I don't even know if stopgap's the right word, but that 2-year guy who they'll let him play until basically they feel like he's run his course, and then that we're going to see first-round high picks sitting longer than we have, in recent past.
It could turn out to be like that, but the thing is the quarterback landscape in college right now is looking pretty slim. There's a guy right now, if you look at Todd McShay's mock draft for 2017, has Brad Kaya. He's a Miami quarterback, and he's got him rated as the second highest pick. It really actually says more about the dearth of quarterbacks at the collegiate level than it does how good Kaya is, because Kaya's actually, talent-wise, yeah, maybe so, but when you look at what he's done at Miami, you wouldn't think, hey, that's the number 2 overall pick in an NFL draft. So I think that the college level is not going to be producing as many great quarterbacks as they had over the past few years, and I think the NFL is going to get to a point where there's going to be teams are going to be scrambling for quarterbacks. I think we're going to see a regression at this position, and depending on how the colleges turn things out, it might be a significant one.
Is that a product of the spread kind of infiltrating the college game so much that these guys just aren't ready?
I think that's part of it, and also, I don't think we I don't think we all realized how lucky we were to get Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Carson Palmer and Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, that crop of quarterbacks that came around in the late 90s, early 2000s, that crop of quarterbacks, the level of production we're getting out of those players was fantastic. We've got some since then. You've got Cam Newton, you've got Russell Wilson, you've got some players since then. But I think there was a glut of great quarterbacks at that time, and it was just a historical anomaly. There's no guarantee it happens again, so I think that's a big part of it too. Is frankly, the NFL just got lucky.
Yeah, and we've seen, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, that the spread doesn't seem to work in the NFL on a consistent level.
Nope, and you can put different players, you can put people who be good in the spread system in college, you can put them in that system, you could do a number of different things with them. You could put, depending on the type of spread system you run to, like a Blaine Gabbert in San Francisco, he ran the spread at Missouri, but he never, it was very much, it wasn't a run-heavy system and things, and you could see that it wasn't going to translate well to his NFL play, and you can say that with a lot of players, too, that you've got some players who are going to have these skill sets, and the NFL is going to start to switch to more of that kind of system, but your quarterback's going to get hit a lot and things. I think the NFL still has we want drop-back passers, so it's going to also depend on how the NFL reacts to the situation.
Yeah, and one thing is, you saw a guy like Bradford where he was the number 1 pick, what year was that, 2005 or 6, and how different the game is just from where he was picked to where it is today, and now it seems like it's kind of getting back to where it was when he got picked. It went through a little bit of a funk, a little bit of a change. We saw the Wildcat, the spread, and now it seems like we're getting right back to where it was when Bradford was selected.
And the NFL has realized, and the colleges are going to realize it too. It's a different college because you can get away with more things in college. If you just have a high volume of talent, you can get away with things. But the NFL has always realized that at the quarterback position, it's great to get guys who can run the football, but passing production is really what it comes down to. You can do any of a number of studies and find out that in passing production, especially downfield passing. So if you get these spread quarterbacks who are running very simple pass plays and it's very a single read or two read pass play where we only got a couple guys going downfield, and you've got those types of things, those quarterbacks aren't going to translate well. And it's why they're going to teams are going to be looking at a guy like Akai and saying, okay, maybe we can turn him into a good drop back quarterback in the NFL, and maybe he pans out to being at that level, but he's not the next Andrew Luck, and that's the other thing too. How many guys like Andrew Luck are going to come out and things? I think you're going to see even fewer of those candidates, and because colleges aren't going to change their game and start to go drop back passing just to please the NFL. They're going to still go with what works for them, and the spread is working for a lot of teams.
So essentially, the way that I read this, and you should read this article over at ESPN.com from Casey Joyner. It's really good. The way that I read this is maybe the Eagles didn't need a quarterback, but the quarterbacks down the line are not fit or not prepared or ready for today's NFL. So you better have grabbed one today, because what you might be selecting from down the line might never be ready, where this guy, he might not be ready right now, but at least has the skill set that suggests that at some point he will be.
Yeah, I remember hearing somebody after Tannehill signed that big contract with the Dolphins, there's somebody in the league, they ask, well, geez, why would you give that guy that kind of money? And they're like, well, they looked at what they had and looked what was coming up down the road, and they said, well, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. We'd rather sign him and know that we've got a guy who's going to be a good quarterback, and maybe not, if we can get a great one later, great, but we'd rather at least have a good quarterback now. And I think that's the situation the Eagles looked at and said, maybe Wentz isn't the next Andrew Luck. Maybe he's not going to turn out to be that guy. But again, I said it before, where if Jerry Jones thought that he could get the next Tony Romo, if he could get a quarterback right now, I said this is going to be Tony Romo for the next 10 years. I think that the Jerry Jones, he put a second mortgage on Jerry World to get that player if he had to. And I think the Eagles looked at the situation in a similar perspective and said, hey, Wentz might not be the best quarterback in the league. He may not be an elite guy, may not be Aaron Rodgers or something, but if he's a top 10 quarterback, it keeps us in contention for the next 10 years. We could build the team around him, and that gives us a good enough player at that position. So, yeah, I think that they looked at what a relative dearth of players is going to be at that position and said we need to act now, because if we don't act now, we might not get to act later.
The key is keeping everybody hunky-dory.
yeah, you got to keep. Yeah, exactly. Because if Bradford isn't hunky dory with it, and you lose a season or two out of it, that's not good. But
if I'm not saying Wentz is going to do that, but in the case of an Aaron Rodgers situation where, all right, now Rodgers or Wentz wants to start playing, and let's say Bradford holds him off and he keeps playing well, that's just it's a very fluid situation that. It seems like it could change week to week, year to year, quarter to quarter in terms of the guy who's actually getting the playing time and how he's playing, and then the mindset of the guy behind him and where he thinks he should be.
Or I'll give you one here. Okay, Sam Bradford plays the next 2 years, but he realizes the Eagles don't want to sign with them long term, and now Jerry Jones needs that quarterback, and suddenly Sam Bradford's playing in a Dallas Cowboys uniform in a couple years, and it's Bradford versus Wentz in 2 years.
I think you had the Cowboys fans cringing, the Eagles fans smiling. I don't know how they feel about all that. Hey, look, I think in the end, I think Eagles fans are hoping that Wentz works out. And what the Eagles tried to do, and what your story suggests here, Casey, is that they didn't want to throw away or waste a season, so they stuck with Bradford because they wanted to be relevant this year while trying to develop a quarterback at the same time.
Yep, and realizing that Wentz was a prospect who had, I think they played for the ceiling on Wentz too, to where he could turn into that upper tier player and things, and knowing that you can get that type of prospect and where they were in the draft, what they had to pay to get up. Okay, well, if you have a better season down the road, and let's say you've got later pick season than what they had last year, let's say you do have a really good year, this might not be, those opportunities might not be as relevant, and you also had a situation where they could trade up, because a lot of times the teams that are in those positions, they're going to get that quarterback. But they had a situation where they could trade to the team that already was set at quarterback. So unique set of circumstances. I think the Eagles reacted.
And they're all getting equal reps right now. I don't know if that's something that you think is odd or what, because to me, if I'm Bradford, I'm learning a new offense for like the 10th time, it seems like. I got another new coordinator here. I'd like to try to get as many reps as I can because, I'm learning a new offense, and this is the first offseason in a while that I've actually been able to do something other than rehab my knee. So I want to kind of get out there and, get the blood going and everything. But Peterson has said, no, we're all getting equal reps out here. I guess that's kind of normal at this stage in OTAs.
I think they want to build depth. I think that's one of the things to say. It's probably normal too, but I think they'd like to build depth. We want to get guys to make sure, because they've got to be thinking also, Bradford, as good as you are, and we know you played well last year, and maybe your injury track record is a bit overblown. People think that you're a chandelier, and you're not. But point is that you still got hurt, and you got hurt some last year, and we need to be as ready as we can in case you do get banged up, even just for a couple of games. We need to have our other guys as close to ready to go as possible. So I think that enters into it too.
All right, Casey Joyner is over at ESPN.com. You can read his story on the Eagles quarterback situation. It should be a long, prosperous run at the quarterback position. They went back to Peterson. They kind of brought us back to the Andy Reid era, and now they're trying to do the same thing again with Carson Wentz. Maybe he is the Donovan McNabb, number 2 overall picks that can take you for 10 years and never have to draft at that position again for a while. You can start focusing on other spots.
Yep, you can spend your draft picks doing it. You can spend your organizational elements doing it. In fact, I pointed out in the article that Al Davis back in the day, he drafted Ray Guy, a different position and all, but people asked him about it, and Davis said, "Yeah, I drafted the best punter who's going to upgrade our terrible punting, and also I don't have to think about punter for the next 10 years. I can devote our resources elsewhere." Same thing with the Eagles, but especially for the short term. I mean, if this pans out even for just a couple 3 years, you don't have to think at all about quarterback for the next couple 3 years. You can spend your money and your time going at other positions, and then maybe you need another quarterback in a couple 3 years. But yeah, for the short term, you're set.
All right, good stuff from Casey. We appreciate it, pal. Good story.
Thank you, man.